What's up, guys, and welcome back. Well, today is actually going to be an exciting video. I've been waiting to do this for a couple months now. I have stole the wife's 4runner, and we're going to be doing a lift kit, rims, and tires today, but she thinks she's getting running boards, which it's not going to be running boards, so she's going to be totally shocked when she finds out when I get home. So we got this set up here. I've actually set up at my parents' house. We're going to get this done, and I'm going to start on this, and I'll bring you along for the journey. All right, so now what we got for our lift kit, we got Bilstein medium duty shocks for the back here, and then we got Bilstein 5100s for all the way around. So these will lift the front. I'm gonna set them on the 2 3/4 inch lift, and then this is a 2.5 inch medium duty spring for the back. And I'll leave links for everything I used today, so that way you can see what I had. So all of this came from Shock Surplus, and I'll leave a link below so that way you can go check them out. All right, guys, so I'm sitting here editing this video. It's the next day, and I wasn't gonna make this a how-to video, but I actually recorded enough I can do almost a step-by-step because I really couldn't find any of those when I was out here trying to figure out if I was gonna do this or not and looking for those small pointers. So I did throw it together. I'm gonna talk over some footage I had here. This next little part of the video here is gonna be me explaining the lift and how I'm putting stuff on. And then once you skip ahead of that, will actually be her reaction when she sees it for the first time, and then we'll talk about what we did after that. So I'm gonna start with the front end of the vehicle today. So I got it jacked up, got it on jack stands, and I'm also using my jack because with the 4runner, it seems like the suspension has a lot of travel to it, so you need to push it up even farther to get the wheels off. Now there's 2 pins that need to be removed. One of them is up here on your upper control arm where your upper control arm ball joint is. Take that pin out so that way you can take your nut off. This pin actually has like a little hook on it that it catches the nut itself. And then your front torsion bar has a pin in it that you'll need to remove. That'll be the only 2 pins that you'll run into. Now right here, as I undo this top bolt here on the spindle, it's keeping the spindle and the upper control arm hooked together. I actually have the jack under the bottom control arm holding up this assembly now, so that way the pressure of the strut is not pushing everything down. I got it pushed back up to almost ride height, so everything has a little less pressure on it. So here on the top of your upper control arm, you're going to have a 10mm socket. I do remember this bolt is a 10mm. Sorry if I don't remember all the rest of the sizes. So you're going to want to disconnect that so that way your brake lines don't get tight later on, and you'll see in the next step here. Next, you're going to want to disconnect the front sway arm from the spindle here. And now there's 2 more bolts where the sway arm is actually connected to the frame. You're going to want to disconnect those because you're going to need to pull that sway arm down some so that way you can get the strut assembly out later. So now once you get that front sway arm disconnected from the spindle, you can go ahead and drop the spindle from the upper control arm up top. And now I'm going to use a short bungee here and wrap it around the control arm to help hold this spindle up because your brake lines are still going to be connected to it, and you do not want to pull any of those tight and crimp one or maybe bust one. And then you're going to want to come up here on the top, and this is, I think those are 14mm bolts on top of the strut assembly. There's 3 of them. Take those out and you'll be able to drop your strut down, and there's 1 bolt on the very bottom that you'll be able to see. I didn't actually record taking it apart though. So now you have everything disconnected. The jack stand you put under the bottom A arm here, you can lower it down so that way you have your strut assembly fully extended. You can take and release it out then and drop it down out the bottom. So now that I have everything out, I'm going to take it over here and I'm going to get my spring compressor put on. Now on the driver's side, there was enough gap between the spring and itself that we could get the assembly in there to be able to pinch it down. But on the passenger side, the spring was compressed so much tighter there was not enough room except for at the bottom to get the actual teeth in for the compressor. So we had to stick them in on the bottom and then spin them all the way up to the top. Now once I've got the spring compressed down enough here with my spring compressor, when it's kind of free of the top cap, there's 1 bolt that actually holds the top cap assembly on, and you'll need to put a pair of vice grips on the end of the bolt. It's got like a little flat spot for you. We couldn't find a wrench that actually fit that size. It wasn't metric or standard, so we just put some vice grips on it. And you can take that top nut off, and this is going to allow you to bring the cap off the top and be able to pull the strut assembly apart. So after you take that top cap off here and that nut, you'll be able to pull the shock out of the spring assembly, and you'll be ready to put your new one together. But be really careful with this spring because it's under a lot of tension right there, and it could shoot off, and this is a very dangerous step. With the Bilstein shocks, this ring right here is what sets your ride height for the front. It's got it in the instructions which setting is which. There's 4 different settings here, so we're going to move the ring all the way up to the very top, which is 2 3/4 inch lift, and that's where it's going to sit at. Once you have that ring set on the ride height you want, there's a top plastic piece here. There's a little plastic O-ring you pull off. Pull the top plastic piece off, and then you can slide the bottom spring holder down onto that ring, and then you'll be able to put everything back together, and it's ready to go into the spring itself. A valuable tip here: before you take the old spring assembly apart, actually mark on the top lid the spring itself, and notice on the strut what's going to be facing the front, so that way you can line it all back up, putting it back together. But I've got it all back together here. They send you a new nut for the top here for the spring, so put all your top cap back on just like it came off. So in that top cap, there's going to be like a rubber O-ring type thing the spring sits in. It's going to have the indentation of the spring itself where it was before. Try to get it lined back up in that same indent so that way it doesn't shift around with you after you put everything together. So now that you've got it all together, relieve the tension on the spring itself, and then you're ready to go back in the vehicle, and then just repeat it backwards from how you got everything out. Put it all back together and torque everything down with, I use the 2 ugga rule, so 2 ugga pass tight is where I went with it, and that'll be it. You can move on to the rear of the vehicle. So I ordered the wheels and tires already mounted in ballets from Custom Offsets, and they come with lug nuts, and these are spindled lug nuts, and if you did not know, you have to have a spindled lug nut key to be able to put them on. You're going to need one of those beforehand to be able to complete your lug nuts. I actually had to run down to O'Reilly's and pick one up. Didn't realize they were going to send me lug nuts I needed a special tool for and not mention it. So just an FYI for that, you're going to run into it. Now the rear lift part is actually way more simple than the front of the car. You got your one sway bar connection here, which is going to be a 12mm bolt on top and a 14 on the bottom to hold it, so you can actually take that one off. And everything's going to be tight between the frame and the body here, so if you got small hands, it works a lot better. And you're going to take that off, let it drop down, and we have the back jacked up on jack stands here, but we also have another jack stand under the back axle, pushing it back up to ride height, so that way that sway bar doesn't have a lot of tension pulling down on it. So the shock in the back here, I used a pair of channel locks to hold it to keep from spinning, to work the nut off the top. It's kind of just like the top cap was on the front you were just looking at. Pull that nut off and it'll be free from the frame. And then the shock itself is going to have another bolt down on the axle, which actually has the nut welded into the axle that you can pull off after you lower it back down, which you'll see here in just a second. Once you have the sway bar and the shock disassembled on the top, you can actually lower the axle back down. That'll relieve the tension on the spring here, which is just on the other side of the frame rail, and you can pull that right out and then you'll be ready to go with your new one. Now, since these new springs are a little bit taller, I found it was easier to throw one of my spring compressors on it and compress it down a little bit. That helped me get it back above the axle, between the axle and its seat and the top, a little bit easier here. And then once I got it compressed down, I'm going to set the bump stop back on top, and then back in the vehicle it goes. Now, allowing the axle to come all the way down so that way you can push the spring up in there is about the only way you're going to get this out. So now once you get in there, you can use the jack stand to push a little tension to hold it in place, and then you can take that spring compressor off, and that's all you got to do for the spring besides just making sure it's lined up back in the seat properly. Okay, so we're going to try to get our sway bar line back up. We haven't started picking back up on that rear axle yet. We're going to follow the instructions that come with the actual shock itself for your grommets and your washers. Put all of that together. And then once you have it all together, you actually go ahead and stick the shock up through the hole where it's going to be seated in. Then you can lift your rear axle slowly up. Make sure you get your sway bar line back up in its mounting bracket on the frame itself. And then you can hook your actual shock back up to the frame after you've got it up to ride height where it needs to be. Get it all back together and you're ready to put those wheels on, and that's it. Repeat it for the other side and you're done. Now, as we clean up our mess here, this whole process, I think I started on about 9 a.m. and we were done by 1:30, and I didn't really have any breaks in there. So maybe 4 or 5 hours, but I've actually done several lifts like this before on other vehicles I've had. So I had a little bit of experience with this. If you don't have any experience doing any of these, it's probably going to take you a full Saturday to do this. All right, so we finally finished her up, and this thing looks freaking sick. The only thing left I gotta do is I do have to put the center caps on here, but we're going to get an alignment right now, so I'm gonna leave them off just to make sure nothing gets scratched up, or if they need to torque up some wheels, they can. But it is noticeably bigger. I think she'll be pleased with this for sure. It looks good. We'll do a walk around some more after I get it aligned and I get back home, and we'll get her reaction for it. All right there. You like them?
Yeah, that was really good. You did way too much.
It's a 3-inch lift with bigger rims and tires. Alright, so it's the next day, and you can tell the baby was not happy when she got home last night, but I've drug her out here the next day. We've already drove it this morning. We went to Cracker Barrel this morning actually, so she's already got a little bit of time in the seat. So we're gonna go check it out now, and I'm gonna show you how surprised she actually was. So you thought you were getting running boards?
I did. I was very surprised.
You got
I really off track. Was not expecting it. Honestly, it doesn't even feel like it's mine still. But
so we went back outside last night a few times and looked at it after the baby went down. It was too dark, so I really didn't need to film, and we were kind of over to that point. I was exhausted. So basically, I'm actually going to hand her the camera, and I'm going to show you real quick exactly what I did to it, because she's not going to understand, and she's just seen it. She hasn't seen what I ordered. So let's go ahead and talk about it. There you go. Like I said, we did the Bilstein 5100s front and rear. I did the stock shock, or the stock springs, left those the same because it lifted enough without it. 285 65 R18 BF Goodrich KO2s, and then we did 18-inch Fuel Mavericks. This is the -13 offset 18x9 rims. That's the gloss with the machine finish. That all the way around, so it's like a 32.6-inch tire. So it's a little bit windy out here, so I apologize if y'all hear it, but that's a 32.6 tire. We did have to trim just a little bit to make it work. Come here, I'll show them what I trimmed. So I had to trim this front fender up here just a little bit. You can actually see where I cut just the point off basically. It was about out to here maybe. I trimmed barely anything off. We do hit this back mud flap. We do hit this back mud flap just a little bit, so I might just take these off. I'm gonna see how it lasts. Thought about heating them up and trying to bend them a little bit. It barely touches them.
Stop recording.
All right, so you were super shocked, and I got you. Very surprised.
Very surprised. I'm very happy about it. Can't wait to drive it.
Now my question is, can I put me a decal right here that says SHC? Are you gonna let that fly?
You know how I feel about stickers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No stickers?
No stickers.
Not even if it's advertisement?
No.
It's advertisement.
Absolutely not.
This is a company vehicle.
Veto.
All right, guys, we're gonna end that video off here today. This is gonna be it for the 4runner. We got a lot more stuff coming, so make sure you guys stick around. There's some more stuff I'm gonna do here that she's actually gonna know about, so maybe I won't get in trouble because
no more surprises.
Yes, no more spending money is basically what she's saying. But we're gonna end that video here. We're gonna go inside and we're gonna enjoy the rest of our weekend.
Make sure you hit thumbs up, hit subscribe.
That's right, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, and we'll catch y'all in the next video. See y'all.